Elara Wynnsong! The king's voice was a low, powerful rumble laced with granite and desperate urgency. You opened the door! You heard our call! Elara lifted her chin, the fine hairs on her arms rising not from the cold but from the sheer proximity of so many powerful, silent wolves. She sensed the Alpha King Draven Blackthorn, tall, immense, and wearing the crushing burden of a leader in crisis. I heard a sound that threatened my peace, Elara stated, her voice steady, despite the wild hammering of her heart. Peace is all I have left. Draven stepped closer, the stones crunching under his heavy boot, the scent of ozone and shadowed power intensified. Peace is a luxury my Shadowlands pack no longer has. We are dying, Omega. Not from attack, but from within. We are consumed by an unseen psychological curse, turning my best warriors into paranoid murderers, fighting shadows. He paused, lowering his voice until it was meant for her ears only. We need your sight, Elara. Not the one you lost, but the one you chose to suppress. Elara flinched, her carefully constructed composure cracking. I don't know what you mean. I was born... No. Draven cut her off, the sound like the clang of steel. You were not born blind. You were born with a gift to perceive the emotional shadow of this world, the raw darkness in the hearts of others. It was too much for a child. You instinctively raised a psychic barrier, a total sensory shutdown to protect yourself from that terrifying sight. That is the truth of your defensive blindness, Elara. Draven's words were the key to her deepest, most hidden trauma. He knew her secret. The one that proved her weakness was a desperate act of strength. The source of this curse is magic. It has no physical manifestation. It is a knot of pure psychological fear, and only someone who can see the darkness, only someone who rejected the visual world in favor of the psychic one, can expose the anchor before my entire pack descends into madness, and before the madness claims me. The truth of her defensive blindness hung in the frigid air, stealing the breath Elara needed to sustain her composure. Draven had not just tracked her down, he had bypassed her walls, reading the deepest truth etched into her soul. Her fear, once a shield, now felt like a paper-thin lie. Draven, sensing her internal collapse, did not press his advantage. Instead, he radiated a powerful wave of control, pure, steady alpha energy that, for the first time in her life, felt like an absolute promise of safety, not a threat. I will not force you, Elara Wynnsong, he stated, his voice softening to the texture of worn velvet. But I offer you my protection, absolute, ironclad. If you come, you will be guarded by the most loyal wolves in the Shadowlands, wolves whose strength has yet to be broken by this internal enemy. You will have sanctuary. You will have a place where no one, least of all me, will ever judge your sight. He continued, delivering the final crucial blow to her distrust. I also know why you ran. The Redwood Pack drove you out, Omega, after your parents perished. They branded you a defect and stole your birthright. His scent grew sharp with righteous anger. 2 years ago, I exposed their alpha for the crime of hoarding resources during the famine and dismantled their hierarchy entirely. They are scattered now. The pack that destroyed your home is no more, scattered to the winds by the order of the crown. Consider that my installment on the faith I ask you to place in me. Elara was stunned. Justice. He hadn't just offered protection. He had unknowingly avenged her. The intense knot of resentment and fear that had fueled her isolation began to unwind. She could hear the sincerity in his powerful heart, a desperate rhythmic plea beneath the Alpha King's roar. His need was as deep as the dark song that had called her. If I fail, King Draven, she whispered, stepping closer, instinctively reaching for the steady heat emanating from his chest. If I fail, and the madness claims you and your pack, what becomes of me? If you fail, Draven promised, his voice low and absolute, I will ensure you are escorted back to this sanctuary. With resources enough to keep you hidden forever, you will be free. But I know you won't fail, because the darkness that called you tonight, it wasn't the curse. It was me. Elara nodded slowly, driven by the profound, intuitive belief that this man, this devastatingly powerful king of black wolves, needed her, and in his need, she finally found a purpose greater than her fear. I will come to the Shadowlands, she agreed, the stone cold beneath her feet feeling suddenly less solid than the promise in his voice. Show me the path. The path was immediately revealed, not by light, but by movement. Draven shifted, a fluid, massive explosion of power that left the ground vibrating. His wolf was pure shadow, huge, black as obsidian, and radiating an overwhelming focused control that was breathtaking. One of his beta wolves, a gray-furred male whose presence felt like strained discipline, crouched low for Elara to mount. The journey began in silence, a blur of cold wind and rapid motion across the unforgiving mountain passes. Elara clung to the beta's warm fur, protected by the immediate ring of Draven's black guards. Her non-visual senses were immediately overwhelmed by the sheer intensity of the experience. The cold felt sharp, like tiny needles against her skin. The scent of pine and snow was constant, punctuated by the metallic iron tang of Draven's powerful presence leading the formation. But it was the feel of the pack that consumed her. It was a cacophony of internal noise. The steady, low hum of Draven's sheer willpower acting as a dam, and against it, the constant scraping sound of mental erosion. She sensed the anxiety in the wolves closest to her. Waves of suspicion, quick flashes of imagined threats, a paranoia so raw it tasted like sour bile on the wind. She realized with chilling clarity that Draven hadn't just brought his strongest. He had brought the ones barely holding on to sanity. She felt their despair, the deep, emotional ache of fighting an enemy they couldn't see, an enemy that turned their brothers against them. This wasn't just a political crisis. It was a soul sickness. As they traveled deeper into the Shadowlands territory, the psychological static intensified. Elara focused solely on the single grounding anchor in the torrent of fear. Draven Blackthorn. His mental presence was a pillar of granite, immense and utterly dedicated to the survival of his people. Yet beneath the king's rigid control, she sensed a subtle, heartbreaking tremor, a raw fear not for himself, but for his inevitable failure. The stakes deepened from abstract survival to devastating personal failure. Elara realized she wasn't just saving a pack. She was fighting to keep the very foundation of this man's spirit from fracturing. Every mile traveled drove the truth home. The darkness that afflicted his kingdom was actively trying to consume him, and she was the only one who could feel its unseen approach. The relentless pace of the journey snapped to an abrupt halt. The beta wolf beneath Elara coiled, tensing his muscles, and the sudden quiet was profound, broken only by the distant shriek of wind sweeping over what must be a colossal structure. Elara knew they had arrived. The Shadowlands compound wasn't just a pack house. She sensed it as a monstrous echo chamber built of old stone and ancient sorrow. It radiated a history of power, cold and imposing, far larger than her own sheltered cottage. Draven shifted back, the heavy thud of his feet on the icy ground signaling the return of the Alpha King. He lifted her easily from the beta's back, and as he set her down, his hand brushed her elbow, a fleeting proprietary contact that calmed the sudden spike of fear the immense change in scenery invoked. The atmosphere here was denser, colder, and far more hostile than the territory outside. The paranoia she had sensed in the traveling pack was amplified tenfold within the walls. It was a dizzying, shifting miasma of suspicion. She heard footfalls that paused too long, whispers that cut off too quickly, and the almost imperceptible scent of hidden weapons, not for defense against rogues, but for defense against neighbors. Every wolf they passed registered on her psychic map as a flickering flame of distrust, constantly looking over its shoulder. Draven addressed his second-in-command, his voice a low command that brooked no argument. Elara Wynnsong is under the protection of the crown. She is to be given the Luna's chambers, the best food, and absolute privacy. Any wolf who disturbs her or speaks a word of suspicion against her will answer to me. Being placed in the Luna's chambers, a position of such immense honor and visibility, felt like being hoisted onto a fragile pedestal. Draven's intention was clear: elevate her status to shield her from the pack's corrosive mistrust. But this protection only served to highlight the depth of the pack's suffering. As she was guided through endless stone corridors, Elara sensed the tragedy. The fortress was immaculate, the organization tight, but the wolves within were fraying threads. This magnificent stone castle was a shell, and the psychological curse had become its true master. She realized that every shadow she couldn't see was filled not with actual danger, but with the wolves' own projected terror. The true enemy was the air they breathed, and she was stepping right into the heart of the poison. The Luna's chambers were vast and silent, scented with cedar and rich fabrics, a sensory contradiction to the chaos outside. Draven had assigned a single quiet delta, Lyra, to attend her needs, ensuring maximum security and minimum psychic interference, so... The following day, the real work began. Draven met her in the center of the main training hall, cavernous room where the stone echoed with the ghost of normal, healthy pack training. He paced the circumference, describing the nature of the curse, trying to give substance to the immaterial. "It is subtle," Draven explained, the frustration clear in the slight hitch of his powerful stride. "It makes the simplest shadows seem like assassins. It twists trust into betrayal. We need you to sense the source, Elara, the object or the nexus point of the magic, not the symptoms." Elara sat cross-legged on a thick rug, attempting to meditate past her protective barrier. She pressed against the shield, trying to let in the raw, psychic feed of the compound. But the barrier, erected by her own young mind years ago, was ironclad. Instead of the clear, single signature of the curse's anchor, she was met with overwhelming noise. The amplified paranoia of hundreds of wolves, their desperate fear bouncing off the stone walls. It was a dizzying, suffocating rush of pure anxiety. Hours passed, days bled into weeks. Elara tried everything, tuning her senses to the residual dark song, holding personal items from affected warriors, walking the perimeter guided by Draven's steady hand. Each attempt resulted in the same failure: a chaotic, paralyzing sensory overload, or nothing at all. Her defensive blindness, meant to save her, was now preventing her from saving anyone else. The pack's initial, desperate hope began to curdle into resentment. Elara could feel the eyes tracking her. Not physical eyes, but the psychic weight of their suspicion. Whispers started again, low and dangerous. Even within the fortress, the Omega is useless. The king brought a cripple who cannot even see her own hands. She is a fraud. Draven, usually an unwavering presence, was visibly deteriorating. Elara noticed his scent, the sharp ozone occasionally overlaid with the bitter tang of raw, unshepherded fear. His commands became shorter. His hands, when they rested on her shoulders to guide her, sometimes trembled. The time was clearly running out, and Elara's failure felt less like a setback and more like a definitive death sentence for the Shadowlands. The internal chaos boiled over. Elara was woken near midnight by a sound that tore through the fortress's stone silence. The snarl of a wolf gone feral, followed instantly by the sickening thud of bodies colliding and the metallic splash of blood. She stumbled out of her chamber, Lyra, her Delta Guard, barring her way with rigid obedience. Elara didn't need eyes to map the scene. Two high-ranking warriors, brothers in arms for decades, were locked in a vicious, paranoid battle in the courtyard below. She sensed the cause immediately. One had imagined a dagger flash in the other's hand. The other, reacting to the sudden, unprovoked attack, had only seen treachery. The curse had successfully manifested its shadow into violent physical reality. The Alpha's roar split the night, a terrifying sound of raw, unadulterated pain and fury. Draven was there, a lightning-fast blur, separating the fighters with brute, desperate force. But even Draven's control was fractured. Elara picked up on the agonizing internal conflict, the king struggling to discern if the threat was real, or if the curse was even now whispering betrayal into his own mind. His usual granite presence was now sharp, unstable static. Later that morning, Draven arrived in her chambers, his appearance shocking. His scent was heavy with exhaustion and a dangerous volatility. He leaned against the doorframe, his massive frame shaking slightly. He hadn't slept, and his black eyes, Elara sensed their intensity even without seeing them, were edged with madness. "It is spreading too fast," Draven grated out, his voice hoarse. "3 more incidents today. I nearly—" He cut himself off, running a trembling hand through his hair. "I nearly struck my most loyal beta because a flicker of light off his knife looked like a threat. The time for subtle searching is over, Elara. I gave you weeks. Now, I give you hours." Elara finally understood the true, terrifying nature of the time limit. It wasn't about the pack dying. It was about Draven succumbing. If the Alpha King lost his mind, the pack would tear itself apart in minutes, and her protection would vanish. The internal conflict of Chapter 5, her inability to use her power, had transitioned into the immediate external crisis of Chapter 6. She sank to the floor, grasping the cool, steady wood of the chair. She had to break her shield. She had to risk the terrifying sensory flood of her full sight. The dark song was not a memory anymore. It was the raging pulse of the collapsing kingdom, and it was screaming that the end was here. Elara found Draven in the Alpha's private solar, an isolated room high in the central tower. She followed the trail of his distress, a pulsing, erratic beat of pure desperation that was agonizing to hear. He wasn't guarding himself. His inner turmoil was pouring out, raw and unguarded, mixing with the sharp scent of his wolf's near-feral distress. She found him slumped in a chair carved from dark oak, his head buried in his hands. He was fighting the madness, pouring every ounce of his legendary control into maintaining the boundary, and he was losing. "It's in my blood, Elara," he whispered, his voice thick with defeat. "I see them now, too. The shadows, the doubt. It's tempting me to cull the weak, to end the suffering quickly. I'm becoming the tyrant they fear." Elara approached slowly, her careful steps guided only by the need to reach him. All professional mission, all strategic thinking evaporated. There was only Draven, the vulnerable, powerful man who had brought justice to her abusers and offered her sanctuary. His hand, resting on the chair arm, was trembling so violently the thick wood rattled. She knelt, ignoring the spike of fear that warned her against touching a near-mad Alpha King. She laid her hand, palm to palm, over his. The connection was immediate and explosive. She didn't seek his power or his command. She fed him her certainty, her quiet strength, the psychic shield she had held in place for 10 years, the barrier that locked away her terrifying sight, did not fail under stress. It shattered under the weight of an emotion she had never permitted, profound, selfless devotion. "I am not afraid of the shadows." The thought resonated, burning clean and bright through her. "I am only afraid of losing you." The internal barrier dissolved. The psychic flood hit her like an ocean wave, but this time, it was anchored. She saw the fortress not as cold stone, but as a throbbing, diseased organ, and right in the center she saw Draven's heart, battered but still fighting. "Draven," she said, her voice shaking with the force of the unleashed power. "I came because I sensed your need. I stayed because you offered me safety. But I break my shield because I cannot bear to watch you fall. I choose connection over the peace of my isolation. I choose you." The truth was a sudden, blinding light in the darkness. The dizzying chaos of the pack's paranoia instantly streamlined, focusing down to a single powerful point of malevolence: the curse anchor. It was not in the fortress itself, but close. And now she could see it. Draven lifted his head, his eyes, Elara now psychically sensing their dark, desperate pools, fixed on her. Her confession, the sheer, raw intensity of her love pouring through their joined hands, was a profound shock to his system. It was the only truth strong enough to pierce the haze of the curse. His thumb brushed against her palm, a fleeting, tender gesture before he seized her, pulling her close and crushing his mouth against hers. The kiss was the true catalyst. It was not gentle. It was a desperate fusion of two souls tethered at the precipice of ruin. Draven was pouring his madness, his fear, and his last reserves of control into her, and Elara was pouring back pure, unadulterated psychic power and unwavering devotion. As their lips met, the barrier that had protected her sight for so long did more than just shatter. It exploded outward in a blinding, non-visual rush of sensory information. She was instantly overwhelmed, her mind flooded with the true, terrifying complexity of the Shadowlands. She didn't see stone and wood. She saw the life force, the emotional pathways, the energy streams of history and magic woven into the foundation. The collective paranoia of the pack, which had once been a wall of chaotic white noise, now resolved into distinct, vibrating streams of fear, all leading to one central, malevolent node: the curse anchor. It was not a hidden object, but something woven into the very fabric of the fortress's history, vibrating with the ancient dark song. It was a heavy, iron knot of psychic dread, hidden beneath the massive, unused throne in the Great Hall. It was the heart of the curse, poisoning the pack's unity. Elara broke the kiss, gasping, her entire body shaking as she channeled the sheer volume of information. Draven, momentarily steadied by her focus, his wolf momentarily subdued by the infusion of her light, clung to her. "The Great Hall!" Elara gasped, her voice raw. "Under the throne! It's heavy, iron, it pulses with fear. We have to destroy it, Draven, now!" Draven's scent immediately shifted from desperation back to focused, primal alpha. He didn't ask how she knew or why. He trusted the truth she had just given him. He scooped her up, tucking her against his chest, and burst out of the solar, abandoning all pretense of subtlety. The King and the Omega raced down the collapsing halls, guided by her impossible sight and the powerful new tether connecting their hearts. The dash through the fortress was a nightmare symphony of chaos. Draven, carrying Elara, moved with the speed of a storm, but his mind was still a battlefield. He roared commands, pushing through walls of terrified, hallucinating wolves who lunged at imaginary enemies. Elara, focused on the psychic roadmap, shouted directions over the tumult, her new sight tracing the malevolent, red-hot pulse of the anchor beneath them. "Left, Draven! Across the main stairs, hurry!" They burst into the vast, echoing Great Hall. The centerpiece, the ancient stone throne, sat unused, radiating the intense, throbbing darkness Elara now saw clearly. The anchor was directly beneath its base, an invisible iron knot of compressed psychological trauma. Draven, his eyes wild with the curse's lingering grip, dropped Elara, his massive frame shaking violently as the final wave of madness attempted to swallow him whole. He smelled of ozone, sweat, and the bitter copper of his despair. He could barely stand, his instincts screaming that the throne was sacred, not a threat. "It's now, Draven!" Elara screamed, plunging her hand toward the exact spot, her psychic energy burning bright as a torch. "The iron knot! Shatter it!" With a guttering cry of effort, Draven fought the instinctual paralysis. He channeled his entire alpha strength, his wolf surging forward for one last, desperate effort. He didn't strike the throne itself, but the psychic focal point Elara had directed him to. A sound, that was both a thunderclap and a muffled scream echoed as Draven's fist slammed down. The stone cracked, revealing nothing physical, yet the entire fortress shuddered. The psychic anchor snapped. The change was instantaneous. The dark song died, replaced by a profound echoing silence. The intense, oppressive static that had saturated the air vanished. Draven stumbled back, the wildness draining instantly from his eyes, replaced by shock, exhaustion, and crystalline clarity. Across the great hall, wolves who had been fighting imaginary foes froze. The paranoia dissolved like morning mist, leaving behind only the dazed confusion of sudden, inexplicable peace. They looked down at the weapons in their hands and the blood on the stone floor, their minds clear and horrified. Draven turned to Elara, his powerful body trembling not with madness but with relief. He walked toward her, slow and steady, kneeling before the woman who had risked her peace and broken her shield for him. "Elara Wynnsong," he stated, his voice now deep and resonant, the voice of a true king restored. He took her hands, raising them to his lips, his gaze, seen now through the tether of their hearts, unwavering. "You came because of a need, and you saved us through love. You are not just my savior, you are my clarity." He reached into his tunic and produced a plain, heavy iron ring, an ancient mark of the Shadowlands Alpha. "Marry me, Elara. Become my Luna and my anchor. I need you to see the truth for us, always." Elara's acceptance was a silent promise, sealed by the heavy, cool iron ring resting on her finger. It was the plainest, most meaningful symbol of sovereignty the Shadowlands possessed, signifying strength, endurance, and an unbreakable bond. The wedding that followed months later was a testament to the pack's full recovery. The paranoia was gone, replaced by a quiet, collective gratitude. The wolves saw Elara not as the Omega they once whispered about, but as the eyes of the Shadowlands. Draven and Elara stood before the gathered pack in the freshly repaired Great Hall. Draven, magnificent and steady, placed the Luna's crown, not of gold but of smooth, polished obsidian, upon her head. With the act of coronation, Elara officially stepped into her role. But her true power lay not in the title but in her unique perception. She retained the true sight. Her world was still physically sightless, but psychically brilliant. A constant flow of emotional energy, intention, and truth. She could walk through the fortress and see the health of her people, the anxiety lingering from the curse, the sparks of joy between new mates, the steady, fierce loyalty radiating from Draven's closest guards. She ruled alongside Draven, his strength balanced by her uncanny ability to read hearts. Draven was the shield and the sword. Elara was the compass and the truth. She knew, before any spoken word, when a warrior was struggling, when a subject was being deceptive, or when fear began to breed distrust. Elara made her mission the normalization of difference. She established a new tradition, dedicating the anniversary of the anchor's shattering to the embrace of unique gifts. She taught the youngest generation that her sight, the thing she had hidden in shame for a decade, was the very thing that saved their world. "The shadow you cannot see is often your own," she would tell them, her voice calm and absolute, the psychic truth of it settling deeply into their young, resilient minds. The Shadowlands survived not because we were all the same, but because we needed the one person who saw the world differently. Draven, her constant anchor, her king, and her mate, would stand beside her, his powerful hand resting on her shoulder. A physical reassurance of the connection that had saved them all. The dark song was gone, replaced forever by the steady, resonant heartbeat of a united pack, led by the man who found his greatest strength in the hands of his blind, seeing Luna.